Hey, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for coming out to the Whalen Library this evening. We are excited to have Noelle Fournier and Jessica Roscio here from the Danforth Art Museum. Jessica has been the director since 2020. Prior to the Danforth, she held positions at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. and the MFA in Boston. She has an MA in art history from the University of Buffalo and a PhD in American Studies with a focus on the history of photography from Boston University. Noelle received her BA in Fine Arts from St. Lawrence University and an MS from Lesley. She's a lifelong artist working in a variety of media and in scenic painting. Noelle began teaching at the Danforth in 2012 and also served on the faculty at the de Cordova, the Fitchburg Art Museum, and the Umbrella Art Center in Concord. In 2014, she became the Children's Education Manager at Danforth and has served as the Art School Director since 2016. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Two housekeeping notes. We are recording, so this will be on Wacam, our local cable access station, and on YouTube. You'll be able to watch and share. If you're joining us on Zoom and you have a question, just put it in the chat and I will raise my hand and read it aloud. Thank you.
Great.
So, hi, hello, welcome.
So my name is Noelle Fournier. I am the director of the art school and I'm responsible for all the education at the Danforth, at the museum and at the art school. And we're going to take you behind the scenes. So
Yes.
Jessica and I basically are two peas in a pod when it comes to running the Danforth. So we thought it would be interesting to let you in on the behind the scenes of how the education works and how the curatorial works. So see, are you gonna? I can
Yes, you're gonna start, so I will. Okay, there you go.
So the Danforth was founded in 1975. This is our building, original building, by artists, art lovers, and art learners with support from the Framingham community and Framingham State University. The Farley building, you see here, was built in 1909 by Boston architect Charles M. Baker. The museum and the art school would occupy the first and second floors, while the town utilized the third floor of the building for various needs, like a community center, offices, and a town hall. 2 years of hard work and renovations resulted in the Danforth Museum of Art opening its doors in May 1975. Here you see our opening festivities. Lots of people who were there at the very beginning, and I actually found this image on eBay. So I just scooped that up. We don't actually know what happened for the opening ceremonies. We couldn't find it in our archives, but it's a party, you can see. So, and there's lots of really cool flags. You don't know where those went either.
Yeah, no.
The first event the Danforth hosted was an art class. And that was held in the basement of the building. To the surprise of the organizers, 56 students showed up to the first class, taught by our first and current Danforth art instructor, Nan Haas-Feldman. Right here. It's a picture of her. She's pretty special, our Nan. Until the renovations to the other floors were complete, art classes at the art school took place in the building's basement, which later became a series of ceramic studios. So this is another early class. I don't know the date for this one, but it was obviously a sculpture class, and we had a room full of looms. So we had weaving back then. Here we have a couple more photographs of, it looks like he's doing some woodworking. I'm not sure. And we had a Chinese calligrapher come. So during the first few decades of our existence as the Danforth, the art school offered a really wide range of classes and even showed films. The art school consisted of 8 large studios, a complete ceramics department, a dark room, an exhibition space for faculty and students, and a resource library filled with books and still life objects suitable for observational study. Some of the classes were, as I mentioned, Chinese calligraphy, woodworking, bookmaking, and loom weaving. So a lot of classes that we can't offer anymore, but pretty cool.
So this was, and we're going through a 45 years in one slide, when we talk about the museum. But I think one of the things that Noelle did not mention is that she and I are the only two people who currently work at the Danforth who did work in the previous building. So I've been with the organization, since 2011. So we've been through a lot with the Danforth. So I wish the Danforth loved us back as much as we love some days. But this is a more recent picture of what our building was. Downtown Framingham, 123 Union Avenue. Framingham, the city of Framingham still calls it the Danforth Building, which is really confusing when people are looking for the Danforth. But this was our first director, Hetty Landman, and she helped open the museum in 1975. So this is an article that was published as the museum was getting ready to open. I really love the fact that it notes that the 3-year planning to build and open this museum became so complicated that they needed to use a chalkboard to organize everything. It's like, oh, yes, multiple chalkboards probably. And then this was jumping ahead, not to insert myself in a presentation, but it did. This is me at our very last opening reception at the old building, which was in June 2016. We had just received notice in May that we were going to have to leave the building in October. So we went ahead with all of our exhibitions that were planned that summer. We had a relatively new director. She'd only been, Deborah Petke. She'd only been there for just over a year. And this was our juried exhibition that I'm standing in, which we finally managed to bring back. We've now had 3 years of it, which is wonderful. We had also done this big, wonderful reinstallation of our permanent collection that I had been working on with Deborah for about a year. And we had the grand opening of it in June 2016. So this was at the time when we had this opening reception. We weren't entirely sure what was going to happen. So this was our kind of campaign to just go forth, which we did. We did that. So this was us moving out of the building in October. And we ended up, this is our former collections manager, Christina Wilson, and she and the rest of our staff packed up the entire permanent collection. We did have professional art handlers actually take it away from the museum, but we did all of the packing. And this was us moving Funeral in Brittany, which is probably our most well-recognized painting in our permanent collection, out of the installation. And this was how we left the space back in 2016. And this is how it looked when Noelle and I went just about a month ago.
Wow.
So there was a lot of issues, there was a lot of uncertainty as to what was going to happen to the building. It is still located in downtown Framingham. There had been, when we left, they were going to tear it down. Which had not happened, and then the city really has used it for the past 7-8 years now. And they've rented it out for movie and film they've rented it out as space, which is why one of our former galleries is made up to look like WGBH Studios in the 1970s and 1980s, because the HBO series Julia was filmed in the old Danforth. So I think both seasons of that. So when we went back, because they are finally going to tear it down, and it's going to become the new regional center, juvenile justice center, and they're taking the whole building down. So they invited people in the town who might have had any attachment to the building for any reason to just come by and walk through and to see if there was anything left worth salvaging.
Which there was.
I did find, I had a stick that was it had 48 inches for that height line, and then another like 56 as a sight line for labeling that I used to use when I hung labels in our exhibitions. And I left it in our prep room because I was like, I don't need this stick when we move to our new building. I'm gonna have all this new stuff at the new Danforth. And so I left my stick, and I really missed my stick. it was still there, exactly where I had left it in our prep room. So I brought the stick back, but otherwise there was nothing else. And in fact, we did not leave it looking this messy.
No.
They have totally messed up the space, but they did leave our vinyl up, which I thought was interesting. So now we are in this wonderful new space on the Framingham Center Common. And this is the Jonathan Maynard Building. It was built in 1916. Our previous building was built in 1909, so they're roughly the same age, but this building did not have the deferred maintenance that our old building did. It was pretty much continuously occupied or rented out. Not to get too much into the weeds, but the Danforth had actually purchased this building back in 2013 because they knew we were gonna have to move at some point. The boiler was failing. So we had purchased this building from the town of Framingham. And then we weren't ever really, we never started a capital campaign or really made any attempts to make the move into the building. So when we were evicted, it made the most sense for us to just go into the building that we already owned. But there wasn't, I mean, it wasn't ready for occupancy. So pretty quickly, almost immediately, you were only closed for 6 months or less. We were able to do renovations of the 3rd floor of the building, which is the art school. So the art school is above the museum as it was in the building on Union Avenue. And then the museum went down to just 3 employees, and we just kind of shuffled around until we figured out what was gonna happen for a couple of years. I was at a point where I would curate literally anything. I curated a refrigerator, which was, I mean, which is actually a real project, but I would drive the permanent collection around, and we did shows at the Griffin and at Endicott. So it was really nice that other institutions were housing us. And then, oh, yes.
I was just gonna mention. I was just gonna mention that during this time when the museum was closed and the art school was open up there, we were able to have a collections in the studio situation.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot about that.
That didn't record that. Anyway, the artwork was up in the art school, though,
So,
you know, from the museum.
so through a lot of negotiations and us learning about how cities and towns work in ways that I was not expecting. We did become part of Framingham State officially in 2018, which was really advantageous for everybody on all sides. The Danforth was not stable enough to open back up on its own. So the only way that we were going to remain the Danforth was if we merged with the university. And it actually makes a lot of sense because our founding was tied up with the university. We were not a part of the university, but Justin McCarthy, who was at FSC at the time, was key to the founding of the Danforth. And there was a long-term partnership between the Danforth and the university. In fact, the director of the Danforth had a joint appointment as a professor at FSU up until I think the early 2000s. So it's been interesting to go from being an independent nonprofit to part of a state institution. But it's been wonderful for the Danforth. And we say that, you know, we're a small institution that closed, reopened, and then closed again for COVID and reopened again. So you really can't get rid of the Danforth. So the museum, we have a permanent collection. We have almost 3,800 objects in a wide range of media. So we collect across media. We collect and exhibit American art from the early 19th century to the present day. We have a particular focus on the artwork that is created in New England. Our collecting mission has really refined over the past 50 years. So if you ever see, you know, our early shows within the first 10, 15 years, we collected everything. We showed everything. You know, you open a museum and when people are giving you art, which is what happened, they took everything. So now that we've been around for almost 50 years, we're able to narrow our collecting focus a little bit more. We have temporary exhibitions, and those all focus on contemporary regional artists. And we do 3 rotations a year. fall, spring, and then our juried show in the summer. So our fall exhibitions are up through the end of January. And so this is our new space. This was taken right after we opened in April of 2019. So we were open for about 8 months. The museum was open for about 8 months before COVID. And it's a beautiful new space. There was a lot of really wonderful, I shouldn't say new because it's I feel like it's new, but there was a lot of really wonderful things about the old building. But this is a space that was designed to be a museum, which is really, really exciting because you realize that, I mean, when you realize how important wooden floors, adjustable lighting, and climate control is, and hopefully when you visit a museum, those aren't necessarily things that you're like, oh, I noticed that there's a carpet here. But when you're in a space, you just you want those things to just kind of be there and not notice them. And so it's made a world of difference to have a museum space. So I want to introduce you to our permanent collection, and this is in our Air Permanent Collection Gallery. So you see a very wide range of works that we show every year. So we have one space, this space that we dedicate to the permanent collection. And we change it every January, although starting next year, we're going to change it in September. And so what we do is we want to have a snapshot of what we collect, and it becomes this very eclectic, but I would like to think cohesive installation. And so this is, and another thing is that it's a collaboration between our collections manager who curates the permanent collection and our FSU curatorial fellow, who we have had for the past 4 years, which is funded by very generous donors. And so this is the installation from 2 years ago from our fellow Sam Coombs. And you get a sense of what we collect and how we show it. We have our 2 Gilbert Stewarts. We have one of our Philip Leslie Hales, which I absolutely adore. Our Bierstadt, our George Howley Hollowell, and then we end up, this is Anne Lambert, who's a more contemporary artist, and so it becomes this very eclectic array, and so we really want to show a sense of what we collect, highlights from the collection, recent acquisitions, and things that are new to you, and for us curatorially, it's really important to show a range of media and to not necessarily show things chronologically. So you go in and you experience the work as you don't necessarily, you notice who the artists are. And obviously there are some names that you'll know and a lot of names that you won't, but that you want to be able to experience it all cohesively. So here, this is our current installation by our fellow from last year, AJ Green. So it's in its last month and a half of that. So Funeral and Brittany is back out, along with one of our Hyman Blooms, and then some more recent acquisitions like our Julie Levesque and our Nancy Grace Wharton. So it's really fun to work with. It's fun to work with the FSU students because they just kind of, the collection is small enough that they can go through the whole thing in the database, and they're really mining the collection for a lot of things that we've not seen before. But then of course we have the parameters of certain things have to go out. So they learn a lot about curating, working with the permanent collection. That's another view. So
Coming down.
I know. I'll miss it. And just to show you a few of our recent acquisitions, we collect around 100 pieces a year, sometimes more, sometimes less. We are largely dependent on donation and gift of works, but we do have an acquisitions fund, which is really nice. We were able to establish one when we became part of the university, which is also privately funded. So we are able to purchase works in a way that we weren't before. And so we have a collections committee. There's various levels of approval, but essentially myself as the curator and our collections manager are the gatekeepers for bringing works into the collection. I'm showing you photography because we collect a lot of photography because that's my thing, but I am not biased. We collect everything. So these are some new works by Sonia Tane Fort, Layla Asadi, and Stephen Mark, and then a series of works by Neil Rantoul. who, and then that was, we had actually got those a number of years ago, but this is the first time we've been able to show this. A year ago was the first time we were able to show them as a series. And then our other permanent collection gallery is our Meta Vaux Warrick Fuller gallery, and this is the one permanent space in the museum. And in fact, this was probably the core of the museum as we were designing it and developing it, because we have had this collection of Fullers, and I'll just skip aside to show you a little bit. Meta Vaux Warrick Fuller was a late 19th through mid 20th century African-American sculptor born in Philadelphia. She studied in Paris, but she moved to Framingham in 1909 when she got married. Solomon Fuller was working at the Westboro State Hospital, and she spent her entire career from 1909 until she died in 1968 in Framingham. She was an internationally known sculptor. She was close with W.E.B. Du Bois. She exhibited in expositions around the world. So she's called a precursor to the Harlem Renaissance, though she was really working throughout the Harlem Renaissance. And her family had a relationship with the Danforth really since the beginning, and they did a retrospective of her work at the Danforth in 1985. And then they just the works just kind of started coming into the collection, and they were officially gifted to the museum in 2006. The thing about the collection, it's almost 400 pieces, but they're all process pieces. So essentially what they did, her family did, was they packed up the contents of her studio. So it's all of these molds, maquettes, process pieces. The only finished piece that we have in our collection is this little bronze right here, which is a mother and child sculpture that she made a lot of versions of. This is one of the things that she did on commission and that she would sell individually or as bookends. Everything else was essentially, imagine walking into an artist studio and just packing everything in boxes and then giving it to someone, which is what, I mean, she would probably be appalled at the fact that we're showing all of this, but it's really amazing because we have this open storage. So you're able to see the process of her, working sculptures out. We're still studying them to try to figure out, if some of them became things, if they just stopped at that. She would paint some of them this metallic color so she could see what they look like in bronze, even though they were plaster. And it wasn't until we moved into this space that we were able to really show the works. I mean, they're really, really fragile and unstable, and we couldn't, now they're climate controlled, but in the old Danforth, we weren't really able to show more than 2 or 3 of them at a time. So this is Fuller working in her attic studio on Warren Road in Framingham. We realized this is one of the few pictures we have of her working. We own a fair amount of the pieces she has in the background because they were studio pieces. So we were able to recreate her studio as closely as we could to give a sense of what it was like for her to be working. And this is her with the cast of her Emancipation, which eventually ended up cast in bronze 30 years after she died. And that's in Harriet Tubman Square in Boston. And Fuller is definitely having a renaissance of her own. We're I don't know if this is post Me Too or everything related to the past couple of years. But Fuller is an artist that more and more people are learning about and incorporating into art history. And since there's not a lot of her works in public collections, and we have the largest collection of her work, I would say about a dozen of them can be loaned. And they are being loaned. So Ethiopia Awakening is probably our most well-known piece. She just came back from the Met, and now she's at the Smithsonian. Dance Macabre is at Yale right now. The Negro Poet and 2 other pieces are at the Whitney. And then we have some other pieces that are headed to Virginia and Nevada. And then our museum educator has asked that we please stop loaning things so she can the galleries, which is cool. So I just wanted to point out a couple other things that we're doing. Since we've become part of FSU, We have another very generous private donor who has set up an endowment for us to start conserving works, which has been something we could not do before. And it's helped us save a couple of pieces in our permanent collection that we were not able to show otherwise. The very first piece that we had conserved, we can conserve about 1 to 2 pieces a year. We send them out for conservation because we don't have conservators on staff. The very first piece we did was a painting, a mixed media painting by the contemporary Indigenous artist John Quick to C. Smith, who was someone else who was internationally known, but she happened to go to FSU. So it was really exciting that we were able to get this conserved and to show it. And we contacted her and she forgot that we had it. And literally, as soon as we got it on the wall, she was like, I'm having a retrospective and it's starting at the Whitney, and can we borrow it for that? And it's like, okay. So she traveled around for a while, but now that one is back. This is a print by Isabel Bishop, who's a 1930s regionalist artist. And these are our 2 newest conserved paintings that are both going to go on view in January. This is our Philip Leslie Hale Neon, which has not been out in years. In fact, it hasn't been out since the old building in a show we did in 2015, and our Robert Duncanson, which also was in dire need of cleaning. So just gonna show current exhibitions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because I want you to come and see the current exhibitions. But we have our small gallery is Suzanne Rady, who is a photographer based in Concord, A Murmur in the Trees. And this is a real immersive installation exploring the landscape of really this area over the course of the seasons. And there is DM Whitman. This is Ecologies of Restoration, which is both DM and Suzanne's shows are looking at climate change. And DM uses a lot of alternative processes in salt in a lot of her pieces. So it's kind of a deep dive into the salt and how we deal with climate change and eco grief. And then it's another installation shot. And then Ileana Doble Hernandez, who is a Framingham-based artist. And this is these are all very contemporary shows, but her work focuses on our epidemic of gun violence in this country, and particularly school shootings. So there's a lot in these fall exhibitions. There's a lot of opportunities for interaction. And so they are on view until January 26th. Not June. And I hope if you haven't seen them, I hope you come out and get a chance to see them. We have shows already shaping up, already getting ready for the spring. Tim McDonald, Tina Feingold, and a group show on identity. And then I just wanted to do a quick look before we talk about the art school. And how an exhibition comes together at the Danforth. And so this is, I'm also the curator, and I love being the curator, and I really love working on exhibitions. And there's a big difference between what we did at the old Danforth and what we do at the new Danforth. A lot of what you do as a curator, particularly at a small institution, the curator and the director really work together, and it's often the director's curatorial vision, which is how it is at a lot of small museums. And the director that I had worked for at the old Danforth really felt that works needed to speak for them. She was a white cube enthusiast, and they're totally cool. Lots of curators are like that, but she wanted the work on the wall. No text, no color, just speaking for itself. And I completely understand, like when you want to make the work speak for itself, a little bit of me died every time we couldn't paint the walls, but the work was beautiful. And so this is just a little bit of 3 separate installations that I had worked on at the old Danforth. So you get a sense of what the galleries looked like and just how things were hung. This is my daughter, and I'm just throwing her in there, but that was a long time. She's 12. But this was a show that both Noelle and I were a part of. This was one of the first shows that I did on my own at the Danforth, and it really kind of sums up what the Danforth does. In that Elizabeth Ellenwood was a photographer who I met at a portfolio review in Boston. She was somewhat recently out of college. She was working at Panopticon Gallery, and she had this really beautiful black and white series of architectural works. And so we gave her her first solo museum exhibition. And it was really wonderful working with a young artist, kind of figuring out how to, show these black and white images this is not her show, but in a space that was, also very black and white, and really emphasize the line and the light. And so I think when you go into an exhibition, you always want to think about how the works are spaced and how they're laid out and what the color of the show is and the overall design. But I think the best an exhibition can do is have you not actually notice those individual things. Like you walk in and you just everything just kind of clicks. I love the old Danforth, but literally the minute that director left, I painted a wall red. I was like, I need color. And so, and just my last two slides are just to show you one of my favorite curating experiences at the new Danforth has been an exhibition that we did about a year and a half ago now. And this was Visionary Boston, which really highlighted three particular artists who were working in Boston in the latter half of the 20th century. But it really narrowed in on kind of the visionary aspects of their work across media. And so this is my favorite type of show because it had a lot of different artists. We had loans from other collections and families. We used our permanent collection. We were able to experiment with color. We showed works across media in this show. We had wall text, but hopefully not too much wall text, and really focused on themes. So in putting together an exhibition, this is kind of like my dream exhibition. In that, like, we could really kind of play with the color of the walls and the way in which we brought different media in, and the way in which we had text on the wall. And like, this was something that I was really excited to do. So I feel like because at least right now, I get to decide what I get to do with the exhibitions. So when you go into an exhibition, like, notice how things are laid out and, do these, figure out what works. So now Noelle is going to talk a little bit about art education at Danforth. Yes.
Also, the colors are awesome. Just want to say, she's like a master at that. So first I want to go to this one because, okay, so do you remember that Ellenwood that she just showed you? This drawing, this is the photograph here, and that was a drawing done by one of my students, second grade.
Wow.
And this was one of my first classes at the Danforth. I mean, yeah, kids will just draw what they see if and that wasn't like restated. That was in one sitting. So this is why I love doing what I do. So just really lucky to be at the Danforth. I will just say that one of the strengths of the art school in particular, I'm going to read this because I feel better reading it out loud. I apologize. One of the strengths of the art school in particular, over the years, has been the strength of our dedicated community of faculty, students, and families. Although the people have changed over time, the spirit of building community by creating together has been a constant feature of our school. I've been fortunate to serve as the steward of this exceptional community over the last 8 years, working to retain the energy of shared experiences and building upon the foundations of excellence that was imagined in 1974. I bring that up because it was founded on a sense of community, and I feel that all the time in the building when classes are happening, when I'm walking around the museum. It's palpable, and that's one of the things that's so wonderful about the Danforth. It's kind of an intangible, but so as I said, I am in charge of the art school, but also the education that happens in the museum. We have year-round fine art study for all ages and experience levels. We have a really awesome teen leadership program. We have professional development for teachers, museum tours that are learning and engagement manager. She knocks it out of the park. She designs these for FSU classes to come down, and she designs classes specifically for them and tours in the museum. We have experiential learning events for children and adults. We have all sorts of museum tours. We have a really amazing immersive summer arts program for children and teens, and we're bringing back the K-12 tours. We had to sort of briefly pause those when we left Union Ave because we didn't have enough staff. So now we have staff and time to devote to it. So it's really exciting. Yeah, this is great. So in 2014, I became the Children's Studio Education Manager, and I was responsible for teaching the majority of the classes to youth. My background as an educator has always been centered in museum and experiential learning. So it's been a joy to be at the Danforth, such a small institution where we have close proximity between the studio and the gallery. And we have flexibility for innovation. This you can see here. One of the things I did early on was to formalize the pedagogical approach across the children's and teens programming. One of the ways we elevated youth programming was to hold regular exhibitions and use these wall labels as a way of identifying learning goals, providing context to include the media used. This way, the children understand when they have an exhibition of their work, that the parents and the children can actually see what was meant by the projects, and it elevates the experience. That left image is just an example of some of the work that one of my classes did. We were working on line and form and the connection between 2D and 3D work. And we did some color study in there. And this is an example of how we tend to display things in the studio. At the end, everybody always has an exhibition in children's classes. So this is just an example.
Oh, did it die? It's okay. You can put it.
Okay, I don't know if it will record if I'm not.
Oop.
And this I think she was in 3rd grade, but this was an observational drawing and painting exercise basically. And we spent about an hour or so in the museum drawing. And what I try to do is to try to get them to understand proportions and relationships of parts to the whole, and then I kind of let them figure it out after that. So I thought it was good for them to go back down and sort of go, oh, this is what I did compared to what was on the wall. So did a pretty good job. So this is an example of, this is just all of our teachers tend to take that idea of providing context and having a really comprehensive experience and an elevated experience in the studio. This is Megan with a class, I think, of 1st graders, and she's doing a lesson on Matisse and portraiture. So she's sort of demonstrating for them and, you know, some color theory mixing. So the children can you can see the mirrors right here. So the children will end up sitting down and really studying some self-portrait. We try to cover all the different genre, but it's all fine art based. So this image here in the middle, I've got a class in, actually, you had another image of that exact, yeah. So we were there discussing, one of the most important things we do is listen to the children. We take them into the museum and we really want to hear what they think. I highly recommend finding a child and going to an art museum with them. It's so lovely. They see so many things you never imagined seeing. This is Eleanor. She's been studying with us, if you can believe it. She's like 9. She was like, I don't know, 6 in that picture, but we spend a lot of time in the children's and teens program in the museum, a lot of time. It's really super important to our pedagogy. And this is a side with some of the opportunities that teens have. The top left image actually was from our old building, but we hold portfolio review for teens because we do have access to the professors at Framingham State, which is really great for the teens. We tend to have pretty high level teens coming to take classes with us. You can see here, there's a model. So we try to always have some, some really great high level classes for the teens. We are also fortunate to have 3 fashion designers on our faculty, which is really unusual. And so they teach the history of fashion design, fashion illustration, how to do a mood board. And it's a really great link to Framingham State because they have an award-winning fashion design program at Framingham State. So we're able to give tours up on campus for the teens that are looking into fashion perhaps as a career. And this is an image from our summer program, one of our teen assistants working with the children. We formerly had a teen docent program at the museum, and we had a sort of studio assistantship program at the art school. And when we moved over to the Meta building, I decided we needed something a little bit more comprehensive and meaningful and impactful. So we fortunately have a donor that's been subsidizing that so that the assistants can get a little bit of a stipend. But they have we do a recruitment in January, place interviews in March. We place them in April. We do a really comprehensive training with them in May, and they serve for 4 weeks during the summer arts program, supporting the learning in the school and in the museum. They provide tours in the museum, and they return throughout the year for public events that we have, like the drop into art events we have on Sundays. And it's an amazing cohort of young people. It's a really a pleasure to meet them and work with them. We often have assistants that return year after year, and we even had one return as a teacher. She went to college, became she got her degree in art and has returned to teach with us. So it's pretty great. And let me see what I wanted to say about this. I can just babble, but let's say something. Oh yeah, this is what I was gonna say. So most people are accustomed to going to a museum and just walking, and they don't really stop to there's not a lot of hooks. You don't always know what to sort of stop and notice. So I really try to for education at the Danforth is to provide opportunities to expand and enrich the museum visit so that looking at art becomes a more active experience. Sometimes this is accomplished with a one-day workshop in the studio focused on an artist's technique or subject matter, and sometimes it's through a lecture, an interactive tour, or a kids' night out event, which features a scavenger hunt. We often hold classes directly in the museum so students can drop from observation, and we have an evening drinks at the Danforth event to provide a chance to be creative in the museum while visiting with friends. And these images are just a variety of different ways that folks can enjoy being at the museum for learning. So this is one of our drinks at the Danforth events. We designed a silhouette project, which she made this really cool silhouette. This is our collections manager giving a lecture at brunch, a brunch event. And that's our learning and engagement manager providing a tour to some children directly in the museum. So in addition to the regular core fine art study, we have a number of different entry points for people so that folks can, learn about and make art back and forth as they choose. So this is just a couple more pictures of the studio spaces, some independent painting, some watercolor painting. I developed a mission at the school. For me, my personal mission at the school is sort of this idea of radical hospitality so that the faculty and the staff feel really supported and engaged in what we're doing, and that every student and all the grown-ups of the students feel welcomed and inspired and safe to really explore their creativity. So we my staff and I really work on that every single day with everyone who walks in the school. And it goes back to that idea of community. We have some really amazing teachers because you can see the students do an amazing job here. They're pretty pretty dedicated.
Here's a couple,
Bang it.
it's got a hitch in its get along. I think I'm just gonna set it down.
Yeah.
Here's a couple more classes that we have. We have a printing press. We formerly had, just to give you a little context, our building on Union Ave, we had 8 studios, a dark room, a student exhibition space. We had a ceramics department, we had looms. We now have 5 studios, and that's it. We don't have any of the other things. So the great thing about that is we've had to really concentrate what we're offering. You know, the bad thing is we don't have those other things, so we have to be really good at what we do offer. So that's what we've really been focusing on for the past 8 years. And really working on developing the depth of our faculty pool. So we have a lot of different approaches to sort of how we're teaching. And so generally everyone can find something that works for them. I liked this image here. This is from, I don't know what year. I'm guessing by her garments, it's probably in 82 or something. But I wanted to show this because it just shows across time. It's really important to make sure we honor the students and take time to recognize their efforts. We started in our new building, this adult student exhibition in our largest studio, and we have a reception for them, and it's an amazing experience to watch their faces as they're kind of sharing with their family members and other people, seeing their own work on the wall. It's really amazing. And it's amazing to me too. We had some little girl, her parents brought her a dress to put on for the exhibition party because she wanted to get dressed up for it, and they had flowers and everything. So I just have to show. It's really sweet. There's more to say about the art school, but it's, you know, narrow it down to a little bit. And this was something you were going to talk about.
So I think just to kind of close, we are about to enter our 50th year as the Danforth. And I found this article that in our archives that was published almost exactly 48 years ago. And it says, you know, it says some things about how, you know, how you should, they're not going to tell you to become a member, but you should become a member. And that it is the museum, year-old museum is a joy for young and old alike. It's opened up a new world. It's public conscious. It's designed to reach out to the public. And it works with Framingham State College. So I thought that I mean, this is something from 48 years ago. These are all things we still do. And that we are still very much a part of our mission. And we still want people to become members and to come and see our
Take classes.
exhibitions. But what was noted when we opened, I mean, obviously the institution has changed a lot in 50 years, but a lot of the things that were core to the Danforth when we first opened are still very much a part of us. So I think we had one more slide where I said there's all sorts of things that you can do. Become a member, take a class, volunteer, sign up for a tour. We have talks and events all the time. If you are an artist, we have our juried exhibition every summer. And please get in touch with us at any time. We are small but mighty, and I think quite accessible. So it was too accessible.
Yeah, sometimes.
So
We're
thank
thrilled to
you.
have the opportunity. Thank you for inviting us
Thank
to
you.
speak. It's wonderful to be able to talk about things.